Now, the first thing I have to say about ancient Roman sanitization was that it was very overrated. Now, don't get me wrong, I've got a great admiration for the Romans and the style of living and style of government that they kind of exported to the rest of Europe. But certain parts of certain aspects of that seem to be very, very overrated, and that includes, but is not limited to, the sanitation and living conditions, which I'm going to talk about today. So, first of all, we'll get to the sanitation. In ancient Rome, now you'll see a lot of books say, "Ooh, there were sewage." There was sewage. Basically, the streets would be like this, and then there would be a little bit of a dip in the middle bit, where the crap and the everything else would run through all the sewage. Now, not every source says that, so it just shows that not in every single Roman city. They didn't have that in every Roman city, that's for sure. But it doesn't mean their sanitations were actually up to par with modern standards. In a lot of places, studies I've read say that after Roman occupation, certain areas, their parasite count didn't go down at all because the Romans would integrate the society, and that would be it. See, a lot of times when the Romans would just kind of make a sort of alliance with a local tribe somewhere, it wouldn't actually be completely under Roman control. It would be under tribal control, but they would swear fealty to the Romans, so it would essentially be Roman. So a lot of those areas didn't get proper sanitation. Even areas that were under direct Roman control often didn't get proper sanitation either. They would have sewage systems from pretty far back because, the Romans conquered so much territory that you can't imagine that it was their main goal to overhaul the infrastructure and sewage systems in all of them. Only the very, very important ones, the really important ones, trade infrastructure and such. And so a lot of the places the Romans took, they wouldn't actually improve that much from before. Now, maybe a system of government would change a little bit, but even then, I mean, sure, it would be a little bit more advanced, but it would also be rife with favoritism and corruption, so it wouldn't be that great itself. Now, not to make it look like I'm taking any sides here, because I'm actually a pretty big Roma-boo as it is, but I just gotta say, their government was not run very well in some places. And that actually includes the city of Rome itself. In the pretty early days, there wasn't actually much enforcement for crime. You could just pretty much get away with anything as long as you did it before anybody else arrived. And the sanitation wasn't very good either because the only people the Romans really cared about, now, granted, in ancient Rome you had better social justice than you will in some other civilizations, but they still didn't really care much about the people in the lower echelons of society. So those in ancient Rome would actually live in sort of favelas pretty much. It would be mostly wooden housing, which caught fire all the time. I mean, you gotta understand, they didn't really have too regular of a fire department over there. Sometimes a hastati would come and put out the fire with a few buckets of water, but who knows how reliable they're gonna be. So, oftentimes fires would get pretty out of control in the city of Rome, and this actually happened while Nero was in charge, and one of the theories is that he let the fire burn so that he could clear out a big area of town for his palace, but that's not backed up with too much proof, so it might not actually be true. It might be true, too, because that guy was a crazy bastard. I mean, who knows? But, in the places the Romans did kind of overhaul as far as sewage system goes, they actually did it pretty well. The Romans were among the first to introduce concrete pipes, like pipes that were filled on the outside with concrete. for pressure, because they'd have so many people crapping into their pipes that it would cause a lot of built-up water pressure, and if they didn't have the right kind of pipes to deal with that, then it would just burst and create a big problem under the city. So they had to have the right kind of pipes, the right kind of infrastructure, shit tough enough to withstand the, yeah. And they did, for the most part, in the really developed cities. I mean, even Rome, which was, granted, sort of a backwater, later on even moved the capital to other cities because Rome was such a shithole. Yeah, gotta say, Rome's not that great. Sorry about anybody that might live there who might be offended by that, but there you go. And the Romans actually had pretty advanced underground sanitation, underground sewage. Now, of course, this wasn't as good as, say, in the modern day, what we have now, but it was definitely a step up compared to a lot of the stuff they had back then. And, now, in the Roman cities that didn't have fully developed sewer systems, they would have a person actually go around and collect the sewage waste from people's households and dispose of it, mostly in rivers and such. And that's how they got rid of their sewage, even in towns that didn't have perfectly developed sewage infrastructures. So the Romans, even, as I said, in towns with not very well-developed infrastructure, were able to get the sewage out quickly and efficiently without raising the general level of squalor in the town. But, as I said, oftentimes they didn't do much to change it because there would be the same degree of parasites and diseases for the common people. Of course, it would be the rich people who would notice a change, but, you know, that's about it. Another interesting thing about sanitation in ancient Rome is that, now take this with a grain of salt, because there's not too many historical records that attest to this, but I have seen a few. They would have a big stick with a sponge on it, like a sea sponge. And that's how they would wash their butts. A record I saw from a Roman fort, I think in Britain or something, they would all take a big sponge on the end of a stick, and it was kind of a communal thing, and they would all wash their asses with it, all the soldiers. But you gotta understand, there were so many of them that, I mean, that thing must have gotten dirty, but I don't know. I mean, maybe they were pretty responsible. Who knows? It's really interesting to think about sanitation in ancient Rome, because in some ways they were way ahead of their time, but in other ways modern people will still look at them and say, oh, that's gross, because we got a modern way of looking at things. But really, they were pretty ahead of their time. Even if the Roman government didn't make it a priority to completely modernize the sewage systems of places they took over, because in a lot of cases they did not modernize the sewage systems at all. They remained in Stone Age technology, well, all the way through the Middle Ages, pretty much, because after Roman sewage knowledge was lost, cities got even dirtier. But that's a video for a different day. Yes, actually, I probably should make a video sometime about the technological drop-off that happened after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. As I said, though, video for a different day. Alright, good night, and definitely have a good night. I wish you all the best.